Hey everybody, welcome to our first ever Twin 10. And if you don't know what Twin 10 is, don't worry about it because I'm figuring it out right along with you. Basically, we wanted to create these episodes that are at least 10 minutes in length, where we can bring on special guests that we're interested in talking to, our spouses, our mailmen. Let me tell you who I have with me today. This is gay Pastor Grant. All right, you've got straight Pastor Grant and you've got gay Pastor Grant. I don't know which side I'm editing you on, so I'll do it on both. Grant, you reached out to me on social media. Just a very nice message. You were very complimentary. You offered me a lot of money for pictures of my feet, which not a problem. Not a problem. I got two of them. I don't mind. Could I ask you real quick to give us a 50,000 foot view of you? That would be great.
Sure. And thanks so much for having me. I'm Grant. I am the gay Pastor Grant. I was a pastor for 15 years. I served in several churches over the years, an evangelical church, a more conservative congregation, as well as some really progressive mainline congregations, and discovered I was gay late in life. And in retrospect, I should have known. And
like you had like a blood test, right? And then they're like, we have good news. Your cholesterol's down. Your gayness all-time high. It's up there.
Spiked late in life. And when I realized, when I accepted that I was gay, however you want to put that, I had already garnered this 300,000 person following on TikTok. And so kind of fell into coming out publicly and living my best life as an ex-Christian and ex-pastor.
I had assumed that why your account was so popular was because it was this big, like, hey, I'm gay, I'm an ex-pastor, I'm an ex-Christian, whatever. You're telling me different? You had a huge following as a boring old Christian? Oh,
right.
How did that happen?
You know what? I started making TikToks just because I was curious. I kept seeing the app on Facebook, the ads for the app. Downloaded it, opened it up one day and was like, I hate this. This isn't for me. But I didn't let the algorithm do its thing yet. The more that I hopped on it, the more that I loved it and said, I'm going to make some videos. One day, was making a little Sunday morning dance video, putting my robes on. It popped off, mostly with people telling me that because I was a priest, I was an evil person and accusing me of being an abuser. Deleted some comments, didn't know what to do with that. Next Sunday, same thing, popped off. And before I knew it, had a really big following. And I got a joy out of being able to connect a bunch of progressive clergy on TikTok. Lots of pastors who were affirming of LGBTQ individuals and affirming of other religions and affirming of more broad perspectives on faith. And really enjoyed getting tell gay people that they were okay. And then in the midst of all that, I realized that I was gay myself. And
that's how it happens, I hear, is you start affirming it and then they get you. It's either that or a vaccine. I don't remember exactly.
That's right.
But
that's right.
Something. So Grant, could you tell me or tell us, what's your situation now? What's your family life like? I know you've got some kiddos, you got a husband, you got all that. So where are you in the world? Who are you, man? Who are you?
I am married to my husband Trent, and we actually just got married this past April. So running on 6 months.
Congratulations.
Of married life. We've been together almost 3 years, and it's just been lovely. We've got 2 kids. When I came out, I was married to my ex-wife, and she invited me to come out. Actually, she had sensed that something had been bothering me. I had known I was gay for 2-3 years prior to coming out, just kind of not knowing what to do with that, never intending to come out, just thought I would continue living my life. You know, the pandemic changed everything for all of us, didn't it? In one way or another. In the midst of a really hard day or hard week in November of 2020, she asked me if I was all right. And I said, I'm not. And she said, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. She said, do you think you might be gay? And my kids were like 20 feet away in the living room. And I'm like, this is not the time for this conversation. And so I said, I don't know. And she said to me that's not making me feel better. And I said, I don't really know what to tell you. And so left, called a friend of mine, came out to him and just said, if I'm honest for the first time in my life, am I going to fuck my life up? And he said, I think that you might just find your life is more beautiful than you expected. And so came back home, came out to my ex-wife. We cried and we decided then that we were going to co-parent amicably, that we wanted each other to be our best selves. I'm lucky because I wasn't scared of coming out to my family. I wasn't scared of coming out to anyone that mattered to me in my life.
Right.
Now, there were lots of people that didn't matter to me that were not so happy when I came out. But
really, why?
I
Why do you
know,
think
right?
that was? That's
Yeah,
weird. I
yeah.
just thought everyone was really, especially in the church. I thought everyone was so accepting and loving.
Right. My thoughts and prayers are with first church I served that they realized they had a gay pastor. It's just a shame. So,
Gosh,
yeah,
they need to figure out their hiring process.
that's right.
So to back up a little bit, did you grow up in like a really religious home? Like, what was your upbringing like? And then how
Yeah.
did that lead you to be a pastor?
Yeah, super religious home. My family was always loving, but we had a little bit of everything growing up. I was raised in a Baptist church, an American Baptist, not Southern Baptist. I'm sorry, Grant.
You don't, so we call you
Yeah,
guys decaf. You're the
that's right.
decaf Baptists, all right? Like,
Right.
did you guys love America as much as we did?
We did love America. We did
As
love
much
America.
as we did? I don't know about
Oh,
that.
the second church that we grew. So I grew up American Baptist until about sixth grade. Then we went to a church that was a former United Church of Christ church, and
Whoa,
former mainline churches go as hard
whoa.
in the other direction as possible, and so super evangelical, super conservative, very America.
So Church of Christ, for everyone who's not familiar, most Church of Christ, they don't have musical instruments,
Oh,
right?
this was UCC. So this is like the progressive, like the hippie cool, like yeah, UCC, United Church of
So,
Christ.
okay, well then what I'm familiar with Church of Christ then is the not cool, as if what you just described is cool at all. But they had no instruments. You had to be baptized in their church to be a Christian. Like if you weren't Church of Christ, you weren't a Christian
Yeah.
or any of that.
So,
Was some of that where you were, or was it a lot more of
no,
like an evangelical church?
it was just a standard evangelical church. Just
Okay.
standard evangelical church. They dropped out of, I remember as a junior high student, that church dropping out of our denomination because that denomination said it was okay to be gay. And my church said that is wrong. And I'm sure that that's a formative thing for me in looking back at my life, like watching my church purposefully vote to disaffiliate from a 150-year-old relationship with the denomination they belong to over
Yeah.
that. And so, growing up, my parents were always really open-minded, far more open-minded than I was. I think I was the radical, actually. I was the one that, I can remember once where you all just brought this up in your podcast. I can remember once where we went and stood at the side of a road with anti-abortion posters.
Yeah.
Only once. And I don't even know why my parents took us. That wasn't really their vibe. My parents were very religious, but very loving. They were not the crazy Christian that I was. And so I was the one that went to youth group all the time. I wanted to be in the band at church. I wanted to be a pastor. I felt like I had a call to ministry and ended up going to another school my freshman year of college to be a teacher. And it was the most affirming liberal school I could have gone to. And it scared me.
Yeah.
I retreated after that year. I think I would have been gay about 15 years sooner if I would have stayed. But
You
yeah,
couldn't
I
handle it. You're like these
retreated, ran
godless
off to a
heathens.
huge Christian university here in Indiana.
Can I ask you about,
School.
you mentioned your youth group experience. For me, I thrived in my youth group. And I was like you. I had very strong convictions about everything, probably just as much as my parents. Like I was can't watch that. It's got a curse word in it. I was very much about all that life. So I thrived in the youth group. I was like the king of my youth group. But outside of that, I did not. Like in my public high school, I was nobody. In my, like in all other areas of my life. But when it came to the youth group, that was my spot. What was did you like thrive in the youth group environment or what were you like?
Yeah, I thrived in the youth group environment, thrived at school as well. I mean, I was in show choir,
All
I
right,
was in
Grant.
drama.
All right,
I was
Grant.
like both.
Okay.
I was
Okay,
great.
you're cool.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. You're super cool.
Cool. I don't think so, but yeah, I loved it. I loved youth group. It was a big thing. And I remember when I was just fresh out of college, I was a pastor. My sister, who was always way cooler than I was, went off to work at a mission in Boys Town in Chicago. And like she started to change my family's hearts on lots of stuff. And like
Really?
Yeah, and I think had my sister not have worked at the mission in Boys Town, had not have worked with male prostitutes and the LGBTQ community directly, I think my family would have still loved me. I don't think they would have cast me out. But it was her working there that really softened the rest of us up and,
That's
and
so
made us
cool.
realize that
Was
the
it a
world's
Christian
there.
thing? Why was she there? Was it a like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
was it a church
Emmaus,
thing?
Emmaus Mission, at one time, it may still be the only organization that works directly with male prostitutes solely. And they do great
Wow.
work just providing physical needs for people on the streets in Boys Town. And,
And what's it called?
providing Emmaus Mission. It's,
Would you like to
and
explain everyone the name of that? Where Emmaus comes
yeah,
from?
yeah, Emmaus being the road where Paul found Jesus. No, where
Yep,
Jesus.
no.
Oh my gosh, I've
No.
been out of the church so long.
That was the road to Damascus. I didn't want to call you
Yeah.
out on it.
Emmaus being the road where Jesus revealed himself to the disciples after Easter. Thank you.
Oh
Over
my God.
communion.
I
That's so
was
funny.
so
Listen to
embarrassed
me.
for you for a second. Oh
Right?
my
My Bible is
gosh.
right there and it's so dusty
Oof.
too.
Ooh. You still have your Bible. I
I
I
do.
out of great anxiety like got rid of all of them. Like
I
like
have
they were like a talisman of something. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like I was like, can't be in here. Can't be in
I
here.
got rid
I
of a
mean,
lot of them, but I kept one Bible that was special to me from college, and I kept a Bible that belonged to my mom that I got after she died.
oh,
And other than
that's
that,
sweet.
I got rid of I gave my library to everyone I knew when I left ministry. And they said, you might want this someday. And I said, if I do, I'll call you.
I'm telling you, I've had the same conversation with people when I've said stuff like, "Oh, anything that's Christian, all of my books, they're all gone. I didn't want them," and they're like, "But when you get through this," I said, "Through what? Like, what do you
Right.
mean
Yeah.
through what? Like, you think I'm just taking a breather, and it's time to get back out there?
Right.
All
Like the
right."
closest thing, I've got Fred Rogers on my desk. Like that's as close to like Christian paraphernalia as I've got in my office. So
That doesn't count. He's
we love Fred.
universally the
Yeah.
the the best. So you were super cool in high school. That explains because you have an energy that you peaked in high school. So that's good. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
I,
Why did you want to become a pastor? And can I tag another question on
yeah. Please.
like the conversation I just had with Drew on Twinuendo? Like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find it on all of our podcasts. On our hit show Twinuendo, we just had a conversation about Drew feeling different his whole life. And that when it came to his sexuality, I mean, he remembers being like 6 years old and relating to the boys differently and having crushes on the boys. That was it was obviously not my experience. I was just surprised by that. So for you, you're being told gay bad. Our whole church is going to leave a denomination because of it, which for people listening is not like a box you check.
Mhm.
Like that's a huge fucking deal. Because
Yeah.
there's property connected to it, there's money connected to it, there's resources and tradition and relationships. The church I was in did the same thing. We left the PCUSA because they
Yeah.
started affirming gay people and joined the Evangelical Presbyterian Church. And when we did that, I was sitting in my desk. We had this 100-year-old building. I was sitting at my desk. The pastor calls and he says, "Are you at the church right now?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Lock the doors." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Why?" And he said, I think the presbytery is coming. And if they get inside, they're going to take the building away from us because we've left the denomination. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, so it's a big deal. So you've got that big thing happening where your church was like, gay so bad, we're going to blow up our whole church tradition to get away from it.
Yeah.
What are you feeling? Did you have that? Did you have like that understanding about yourself yet? Like, or had you not gotten that vaccine that turned you gay yet? Like what?
No, it was right about the same time. Now, it's so funny that you brought up that conversation because as I was listening to Drew talking about that, like I can remember really little, like trying on my mom's high heels. And like, I was definitely more effeminate as a child. I never felt strange though. Like that was just how I was. My parents never made me feel weird. Now looking back, I think there were probably times when my dad would have loved for me to have been an athlete. Like I remember my dad wanted
Right.
to play catch with me and I'm like, but I just want to do crafts in the house. Like it was right about the same time that our church was dropping out. At the time, I didn't realize that like I'm gay, but like I can remember the first time that I felt attracted to a guy. Like I was in seventh grade. I saw this guy walk by and I was like, man, he's cute. And that was the first time that I thought that. But in that moment, I didn't think you're gay. What I thought was, oh, you're so broken. Like it never even crossed my
Mm.
mind that I was gay. I just thought immediately that that was wrong and it was bad and I was broken and that was sinful, and never even entertained the thought that I was gay. And, fast forward 20 years, even as an affirming pastor, where I was baptizing the children of gay parishioners and affirming the love between gay members in my congregation, I still wasn't able to look at myself and say, you're gay. Instead, that, like in retrospect, now I'm like, I should have known. I should have known. But as my therapist so wisely told me after I came out, my therapist said, your mind was protecting your heart until you were in a safe space. And I think that that's really what it was. Once I said those words out loud, I could finally see that it wasn't just a piece of me. It wasn't that I was broken. I mean, it's who I was all along. But I never felt out of place or strange as a young child. Now, from like junior high and up, then I started to I just felt broken. I felt wrong. I felt dirty.
Did you guys have a really strong, Drew and I always say that like our church was sex obsessed because we obviously grew up during the purity culture movement, and we can have a long conversation about that at some point. But, we constantly talked about sexuality. We constantly talked about how gay people were ruining America and blah, blah, blah. When you got to that middle school age, that high school age, were you in a church like that talked about it so it was top of mind? Because for Drew, I can't even imagine how torturous that was. That, I'm sitting in church and constantly hearing it, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks. It's well, I still like women. But
Yeah.
were you in the same type of environment? Was your church sex obsessed like that? Did you guys talk a lot about purity and all that?
I mean, I was sex obsessed, but the church itself, we definitely had moments where we talked about purity culture. I was a part of purity culture. I bought the books. I wanted to read about it, partly because I knew that those books on purity culture would tell me stuff that I wanted to know. But my
Yeah.
parents were the youth leaders, along with a couple of their friends, and so.
Okay.
They just kind of like they would provide us some resources, but we never delved too deep into sex as youth group. And so I was spared a lot of that.
Good for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what I'm wounded by, I brought upon myself in lots of ways. Man, I love.
So then that leads me to, speaking of bringing it upon yourself. So at what point did you go, this can be my life? Was it pre-college? Because I went to a Christian school because I knew I wanted to be a pastor.
Yeah.
There was nothing greater you could do in my church than commit your life to ministry. And so I remember making that decision. I was a junior in high school, and I became the most celebrated person. Our youth group would literally separate us. They would take us places special to train us to be leaders because we're going to lead this thing one day. So I made that decision in high school, and that's why I ended up going to the college I went to, unfortunately. Yeah, what was your experience? When did you decide this is it? This is going to be my life, and what was that like?
You know what I had, and it's so funny. You all were just talking about Carmen not that long ago.
Oh,
I had a
love it.
moment listening to Mission 316 by Carmen, and I felt
I
like
had that CD. I
yeah,
had it.
oh, I loved it. But
Mission
I felt like I
316.
heard the voice of. Now, mine was on WoW. I didn't own a Carmen CD. All the Carmen I owned was on a WoW CD. But
Wow, that's what I call
yeah,
worship,
WoW.
or wow, that's what I call
WoW, yeah,
Christian
WoW,
music or something.
ECM, contemporary Christian, yeah. I had WoW
Oh,
worship later on too, but those black and
oof.
red, the black and red WoW was my favorite.
Who was your favorite Christian artist when you were
Stephen Curtis
in high
Chapman.
school? He
Stephen
was
Curtis Chapman.
so good. Like
He
just
was
as an
so good.
artist, he's such a great guitarist. He just writes beautiful music. I mean, like,
Yeah,
let's put aside his message. It's like shit, but he himself,
right?
he wrote some
Guys
incredible music.
loved it.
Dive.
Depthy stuff. Listening to him write music through the loss of his daughter. I mean, just he's
Oh,
his music was formative to me, and I was
I will be
obsessed.
here.
I
You
mean,
know
like,
that song? I will
yeah,
be here
yeah,
with this. That
absolutely.
was our song. Like that was our wedding song, and that was like we were We were
Yeah,
all in.
his whole
Oh,
love
he
album
was
was
great.
great.
He was great.
I was obsessed. I had posters and like it's what now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the writings on
Yeah,
the wall, like
literal on the wall.
on the wall. Yeah. So I was listening to Carmen and like I had a now see we're talking about Damascus Road anyway. I had a Damascus Road moment where I felt like I heard the voice of God in that moment calling me to ministry and said, I'm gonna do it. This was like eighth grade. I went to my Sunday school teacher, who was my pastor's daughter, who died a few years ago, and I had the privilege of being at
Mm,
her bedside right before she died,
mm,
and I told her, like I think I'm called to ministry, and she didn't question me in that moment. She didn't ask, she didn't doubt me, and that was what I needed. Fast forward 4 years when I was going to college, I decided to go into education. Wanted to go into LEd. My parents kind of encouraged me to. Now looking back, part of me wonders if my mom wasn't like, I do think that boy is gay, and that's why they were like, education's great, you've
Bless
got
his
something to
heart.
fall back on, yeah.
Bless his heart.
I do think that boy is gay.
But you went into education, but
I went into
you had
education for
already
a
in the back
year.
of your mind said, "I'm going into ministry
I'm
one
going
day."
into ministry, and so
Okay.
lasted one day. Literally the first day of school, my freshman year at that college, they had me in a classroom. And I said during that first class on the first day of my freshman year, this isn't for me. And like here, like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? It's the first day of school. And so I
Yeah.
finished out the year. I took some opera classes, some speech classes, and just kind of finished out a year.
Opera
And then,
classes.
right, I know I was a vocal music person that first year that I was in college, and
Grant, you're hiding these gifts
hiding it.
under your
Yeah.
light under a bushel here. You've got an operatic voice.
Well, no longer. I mean, that was 2003. So let's not get ahead of
Oh,
ourselves. But
oh
um,
man. If it
yeah,
comes back, I want to hear it.
that was a deal because I had said, yeah, I'm called to ministry. I'm going to do it. Went and studied intercultural studies for 4 years at a Christian university. Was convinced I was going to be a missionary. Realized that I had student debt and like going overseas wasn't in the cards, and like reluctantly said, sure, I'll go back to the church that I grew up in to be a pastor, and was there for 8 years before I moved into a mainline denomination. But that
What
was a
was
big thing
your
when I came out. Part of my process of coming out was whether or not I was called in that moment. I felt like for my own self needed to reject call. And so as a part of my coming out and deciding to leave ministry, I had a private moment where I said, no, that I reject this part of my story,
mm,
and I'm just gonna be mine now. And so that was a big deal for me. But
mm.
for the first 3 quarters of my life, that really drove everything about me. Was that moment while I was listening to Carmen, when I was convinced I heard the voice of God.
You're at this Christian university studying. What was it? What was it? Intramurals.
Intercultural studies, yeah, it technically international and community development. I was going to go overseas and make stronger communities. Not
So
the worst
what?
mission.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. You're not going and staying in 5-star
Yeah,
hotels in
no.
Tegucigalpa and then posting it on Instagram. So when you were at this Christian university, what was your Christian university experience like? Because I went to a private Baptist college, and when I talk to people about their college experiences, there's so much that is the same, and there is so much that is not. So what were some unique things about your Christian college experience?
The university that I went to when I went was like the fastest growing Christian college in the nation. So it was popping. It was the place to go. It was huge. It was a huge university campus. Lots of big CCM bands would come.
Oh yeah.
And but I found so much community, like until my sophomore year of college when I went there, I never really had guy friends that I was close to. And
Mm,
so I found so much community there just by having male roommates and like curfews, and like I had to make friends with guys because if I didn't make friends with guys, I literally would be alone all the time. That was just the way that Christian universities worked. And I had a great experience. I still have a great group of friends from my time in college there. I ended up spending my last 2 years at college in a freshman dorm. I was the
hmm.
assistant resident director for the freshman
Wow.
male dorm, and it was a blast. The person that I worked with was so formative. He died by suicide a few years ago,
Mm,
and really, even now, he's still formative because I work in suicide prevention professionally,
mm,
and that's because of my relationship with him and watching his journey through realizing who he was and struggling with that. And so
Mm.
I had a great experience there. Like on a lighter note, like Christian universities are so homoerotic, and like the
Absolutely.
dorm life is wild. And now looking back, I'm like, everyone is just sexually frustrated and they don't know how to get past that. And it was just the most awkward and wild experience of my life. And I and I would hesitate to send either of my children to a Christian university after attending one myself. Like it was
So
a
you,
wild,
but
yeah.
you never had, did you have a homosexual encounter while you were in college?
No, no, never did.
Great
Never had a
regret.
homosexual
Greatest
encounter.
regret. You think
Right.
you think
I
about that dorm room right there, and
Yeah,
oh
looking
man,
back,
Tanner was
I'm
right
pretty
there.
sure I had a friend who probably knew that I was gay, even though I hadn't come to that like place of accepting it or concluding that. Our last encounter there was just awkward enough that in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that he knew. I'm pretty sure he knew
Yeah.
that I was gay and that he was just dipping his toes in to see, no, never any encounters at college.
Our college, Mississippi College, was nicknamed Mississippi Closet,
Yeah.
because it was a lot of gay guys who were growing up like we did and were told they were wrong, and then you just put them all together in a dorm. What do you think is
Yeah.
gonna happen, man? What do you think
Yeah.
is gonna happen? So yeah, there was Drew. Drew has some stories because he went there for a little bit, before he went to Western Kentucky University. Go Hilltoppers! And
Yeah.
so anyway, it was yeah. I was just curious what your experience was. So you left college and went back to your home church, the church
I
you grew up
did.
in. At this point, you are still like, when it came to sexual identity, you're like, marriage, one man, one woman, everything else is abomination. Was there any internal struggle at this point? Or like, how are you dealing with that? And has your ex-wife entered the picture at this point?
Yes and no to a lot of those. My ex-wife entered the picture right about the time that I started working there. There was no inner struggle with my sexuality at this moment. Like I just didn't even like compartmentalize to the max. Didn't even allow myself to think about it. There was some struggle in the sense of like, do I really believe this stuff? Do I really believe that
Mm.
marriage is really between one man and one woman? Do I really believe that gay people are doomed to hell? And specifically, I remember one moment where I was, and I don't even remember why I was writing a sermon at a Starbucks, but I was writing a sermon at a Starbucks in Kokomo, Indiana, and one of the baristas there was the sister of one of my parishioners. Parishioners is a churchy word. One of the people that attended my church, and so she knew who I was. And there was a gay guy who was working the counter, and he looked so happy. He looked so happy, and he just looked free. And I just remember looking at him and thinking, gosh, that's got to be nice. Like, he just seems like he hasn't a worry in the world, and he just looks comfortable with himself. And as I was looking at this guy, probably for too long, and now again, in retrospect, I'm like, probably I was infatuated with him, but at the time it was like, wow, what's it like? Like, what's that like?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he noticed me looking at him, and he asked the coworker who knew me, hey, what's the story with that guy over there? She's like, oh, he's a pastor. And so he came over to talk to me, and he said, hey, just talked to so and so, heard that you're a pastor. I just wanted to ask you a question. And I said, sure. And then I got really nervous, and he said, I'm gay. Is that wrong? Do you think that it's sinful? Am I going to go to hell? And I remember thinking in that moment, I know what I want to say. And I, with every fiber in my being, I wanted to say, absolutely not. Like, be yourself, because who he was beautiful and free. And I remember choking on my own words and saying, yeah, yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
gay
I had
people are going to
memories
go to
like that
hell.
too.
And he said, all right, thanks, and walked away. And to this day, I still have moments where I think I wouldn't even know how to begin to make atonement with that person in particular. But in sharing my story and coming out,
Make him a coffee.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
how you would do it.
I think so. But I hope that my life is some kind of an atonement for
Mm.
that moment. And that's the only moment in 15 years of ministry that I can remember saying those words. I was never that pastor who was a fire and brimstone, even when I worked for a church that was. And I would love nothing more than to go back and take those words back. I hope that those words didn't wound him. Unfortunately, words are awful. or they can be wonderful.
I feel like one of the things I'm dealing with now, and you exited the church a lot. There's been a lot more time since your exit from the church and where you are now. So I'm much closer to it, but I regularly deal with guilt. Like I think back on, and I was the same way. I was not a fire and brimstone preacher. And even my internal struggle with, do I believe these things or not, they kind of eked out by the fact that I would avoid certain things. Or like we got to Romans 1, we were preaching through the book of Romans, and Romans 1 very famously is a verse that people use against homosexuality. And I was supposed to preach about it, and all I did was cry. This was a few years ago. All I did on stage was cry and tell everyone how awful my brother's been treated, and that we're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I never touched the, like, is it wrong? Like I was like, it doesn't fucking matter. So there's some of that eked out. However, I have memories of being a student pastor and looking these young queer students in the face and saying that they needed to submit their sexuality to God. Like I have a memory of a parent literally bringing their 13-year-old to me to talk about their sexuality. And of course, I gave them the company line. I wish I knew where that kid was today. But just that, like, yeah, I do carry a lot of guilt, and there's so many things I wish I could take back. And so you've been out of it longer than I have. You've probably done a lot more healing than I have. You should probably have a podcast, by the way. Do you have a podcast?
I'm going to start one, actually.
should.
This year, I'm a part of an interfaith spiritual community, interfaith religious order. My ministry that I'm starting this year is a podcast where I'm going to talk about my life and talk with people from different churches, different seasons of my life, and just kind of recap what life was like.
That's awesome.
Ironically, it's going to sound, I think, a lot like Twinnuendo, just a kind of a reflection.
Well, then
on,
we own 10% of it. I just want to say that
I think
publicly.
so. I think so.
But do you still, I mean, you just shared one. Do you still carry any of that? Like, I know there's so much, and I have so many people who tell me there's so much I should be proud of the work that I did during that time of my life. There's so many people I helped, and I get that, and I'm not saying that didn't happen. But there's so much of that I'm like, man, did my words put guilt on people? Did my words help push along something that didn't allow someone to live as a whole person, that continued to have them compartmentalize and split themselves up and whatever? Do you have any of that? Do you feel any of that? Or I'm sure you've probably healed and you're a superhero now.
Yes and no. Other than that one instance, I can't think of any particular moments that I feel guilty about, like words that I said. In general, I feel like across the board, even in my more conservative days, somehow I managed to find my way into a very love-heavy style of ministry and style of preaching. And so I feel like I escaped a lot of the trauma that I could have had. Where I have guilt would probably be from my final season in ministry, and recognizing how I segmented myself off so much from the church that I was serving. And part of that is to protect myself. And I will say that church did lots of harm to me and my family.
They do that.
But also,
they do that.
Yeah. But there were very wonderful people in that church that loved and cared for me. And there are several that I still am in some contact with. And I very much only brought a quarter of myself to that church. I was still a good preacher. That one of those lovely things about, because I was a Methodist, I was United Methodist, I was a high church United Methodist. I put on a good service because it's just drag. It's stoles and robes and candles and incense at the
Drew
holiday.
told me that before. He's like,
yeah,
that was all drag. That's
it's
so
organ
funny.
music. I mean, I knew how to put on a service, and they loved me when I put on a service because I did it better than anyone else. But I was only bringing 25% of myself. I was in the season of uncovering myself and realizing that I'm gay and blossoming personally. And I kept all of that from them. And Would I still have left ministry? Absolutely, I would have. But part of me wonders what would have happened had I have just let myself beautifully implode as the butterfly I was becoming, instead of pretending that I was leaving. When I decided to leave ministry, I left ministry in 2001.
Did anything else bad happen that year? It's
Yeah,
2001. You
yeah.
left ministry.
Yeah,
Huh.
I
I
was
don't know. Oh,
outed by
good
a
Lord.
member of my staff, actually, is what
No,
brought that out. I had
no. Tell me that story.
my church leadership know that I was gay and that Megan
Okay.
and I were divorcing. Megan is my ex-wife, and so we had to go through in the structure that I was working in the Methodist Church. We had to have a triad with our bishop, and she and I had to sit down and we had to testify that no one was abusive, no one cheated. We had to like sit down and in a room full of people. I had to say, I'm gay. I've not cheated. We're getting along. Everything's fine, and then they were like,
Guys,
you can go and be divorced now. Yeah. Um,
which by the way, like for people who are outside of the church or people that we call CME Christians, did you use that term?
yeah. Yeah.
So that you only come on Christmas, Mother's Day, and
Christmas
Easter.
and Easter. Oh, no,
Um,
see, ours was just Christmas and Easter. There's no Mother's Day in mainline denominations. Even Mother's Day is out. Just Christmas and Easter is good
oh,
enough.
we call them CME
Yeah.
because a lot of like kids will come home for Mother's Day. So and what does mom want? Just come to church with me, baby.
Church.
So CME. But for those of you who've not gotten deep into the belly of the beast, that's how far reaching the authority of the church was in our lives. You would have, I call them firing squads. You would have these things where you'd have to sit down just like you just described, and you had to say these things about yourself, these personal things. And like my process of like the end of my ministry career and heading towards being fired, before they had even decided to fire me, when in fact they had decided not to, and they were going, like they were going to try to put everything bad on an innocent young woman in the church that they had decided to concoct this crazy story about. Even then, they kept setting up these firing squad meetings where I had to confess everything to them, and it's so fucking crazy to me now, Grant, because like no one made me go sit down and do that. No one made me, like, I was just like, yep, you're the authority, you're in charge. And like, so that was part of like where my brain started to compartmentalize, because I would start to look at him and be like, you're not a good person, but you're my leader, so I guess I'll submit myself to it. And it's just the
Yeah.
control there is bananas. So you guys went in front of what I call a firing squad. You guys went
Yeah.
in front of that. You had to say to a room full of people, I'm gay. There was no cheating. We didn't watch rated R movies, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You had to let all that out. And then what? Then what happened
And
then?
on the surface level, the United Methodist Church has changed this year. I don't know if you follow church stuff. I mean, it's okay to be gay and be a pastor in the United Methodist Church now. It was not when I was coming out. And,
Yeah.
and on a surface level, they were very supportive. My bishop said, if you would like to come out, you can certainly come out. You can be the first, there are plenty, first openly gay pastor serving in the state, but single and celibate. You're going to be single and celibate. And I thought about it.
Mm.
I had a real heart to heart with my dad and said, I think I'm going to do it. The church is going to change. I'll just be gay, be single and celibate. I'm going to be open about it. And in the Methodist Church, there's a whole court system and there's a legal structure where you can have charges brought against you in the church and have your credentials stripped from you. And it's wild. And so I talked to my dad and said, I
Yeah,
think I'm
it's
going to
not
do this.
just a job,
Yeah, it's
everybody.
not just
It's
a job.
not just a job. It's a
10 years of
whole
10 years of school. I had 10 years of school to get those credentials in the Methodist Church, in the United
That's
Methodist
wild.
Church. So I had a conversation with my dad and said, I think, well, let's back up. So I said, sure, I'm going to be single and celibate. He said, as he was already like dating. At this point, my ex-wife and I had been separated for months. We didn't publicly say that we were separated. Our family and closest friends knew for 6 months before we'd come out to the church and said that. I'd started to like date a little bit and, realize for me to say that I'm gay and have never been on a date with a guy is a wild thing. Like if I'm going to like
Yeah.
blow my life up, like let's go on a date with a guy at least.
Yeah.
And so I had started dating and I find myself in this room saying, sure, I'll be single and celibate. And the way that the church worked is they were like, thanks, we appreciate it.
A real
Like,
don't ask, don't
yeah,
tell. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. And
We
so I
we
let
had that in our church, our non-gay
yeah,
affirming church. we absolutely had gay
Yeah.
people on staff that they were like, but you're cool, right? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
nuts.
And so left that shortly after that meeting, within a month and a half, went on a first date with my now husband and just fell madly in love and knew then that things would never be the same. So, we'd announced that we were getting a divorce to our church. That was the last time that my ex-wife, set foot in a church building. Like I never let my kids come back to church with me after that day. I didn't
Mm.
want them there because I didn't want them hearing what things that might be said by individuals in the congregation. But when Pastor Grant, with the rainbow stoles and the really good singing voice and the charismatic personality, announces he's getting a divorce from his wife, people started immediately assuming the closet was glass. The closet was glass all along. The closet was
Yeah,
glass before I realized I was gay. A disgruntled staff member who I had butted heads with many times over issues of patriotism in the sanctuary and over it's always the American flag in the sanctuary. It's always over lots of things. There were several people that didn't care for me because they knew I was a liberal. Even if I was straight, I was liberal. And so this individual and their family had begun to tell people, well, he's getting divorced because he's gay. And the day of my second date with
what a
Trent,
piece of shit.
the day of my second date with Trent, I got a phone call saying, so and so said you're gay. They know. And so what are we going to do about it? And it was just a shitty day. It was a shitty day. I had to call the bishop. I had to call all kinds of people. And they said, well, we'll support you coming out because you're single and celibate, wink, wink, over the phone. And I remember pulling into Trent's driveway that evening. And before we'd even pulled out of the driveway, I was picking him up to go to dinner for our second night. Our first date was at the parsonage. I invited him over, cooked him pizza. We had the most magical date ever.
Scandalous.
It was super scandalous, and
Scandalous.
I'm so glad that our love story began in a church property. But I went to pick him up, and before we'd even left his driveway, I just sobbed and said,
Mm,
"I had a really terrible day." And he grabbed my hand and hasn't let go of it since. And I'm
mm.
thankful. So
Is
even
he just
still,
he's just off screen right now, right? Holding onto your hand.
I
He's
wish, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. He's actually
hey
holding my foot.
Trent.
Hands, yeah.
Hey Trent. Oh, hey Trent.
Fast forward like a month or so, I'm still deciding what I'm going to do. I ended up firing that staff member, firing another staff member. It was love. Like I loved it.
How'd that feel? How'd that
It was
feel though?
it felt great. But
Oh,
even in firing them, I couldn't even say, yeah, I'm gay. I couldn't even say I'm gay. I had to just say, sorry, here is a 2-page document full of all the ways you've worked against me and you're gone. So I decided to go on kind of a bucket list vacation. I had booked a trip to go visit with some TikTok clergy friends that I made. We were going to go to San Francisco and just kind of see the city and meet up and do a bunch of filming together. I ended up going out to the Pacific Coast Highway first and just spent 2 days driving up and down it myself. It was after my mom died, that was one of the things that I put on my bucket list that I wanted to do before I died. I wanted to drive the Pacific Coast Highway. And so I drove up and down. I went to beaches. I climbed mountains, went hiking. Right before I left, my dad called me and said, hey, I just want you to say that you shouldn't give up your chance on happiness for a church that doesn't give a shit about you. And
mm,
that was what I needed to hear because after
yeah.
2 days of filling my heart up with nature and just swimming in the ocean and hiking, I called Trent and said, I'm going to quit my job. And he said, I think that's great. And I said, all right. And so I came back from that trip, put in a 6-week notice, and have set foot in a church twice since, and have
Mm.
not missed it one bit.